Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today I'm going to be doing a book series review of The Legend of the Galactic Heroes, written by Yoshiki Tanaka. Now, as you might be able to tell from the fact that these spines are numbered, which for the record is something I'd love to see in a series, although of course that can only be done when a series is fully complete. This is a 10-book series. They were first published between the years of 1982 and 1987, so this is a series that is now well over 30 years old. These are science fiction novels that, however, have the feel of alternative history fantasy about them. I'll talk more about that later in the video. For now, I will try to give a synopsis of the overall series without giving away any significant spoilers, apart from obviously the overall feel of the world and such. So, first of all, this is set in the far future, which is still recognisable to us today, however, because it still involves humanity and there are no alien species. Humanity has spread out from Earth, which still exists in the book, and they have created their own galaxy-wide and indeed beyond the galaxy-wide civilization, spanning many thousands of worlds, tens of billions of people, a large amount of spaceships, and different levels of technology depending on which world you live in. Now, there are several factions that exist within this universe. The main one is the Galactic Empire, which is an authoritarian regime headed by the Emperor. The other is actually essentially a splinter group from the Empire called the Three Planets Alliance. Many years ago, a group of people, and it wasn't just a small group, of course, relatively speaking it was small, but these are talking about numbers that are enormous still. You're talking hundreds of millions. Split off from the Empire in a fleet of ships. They flew away on a very long voyage, and they founded what became the Three Planets Alliance. Now this creates contention between them because of course the Empire is authoritarian. They want to control everything. They don't like the fact that people are living separately in another corner of the galaxy that they don't order about and that don't pay them their money and don't pay them their respect and their dues, which they feel as though they are owed. Through the Public Alliance, yeah, they don't like being ordered about like this. They just want to live their lives in their own way, which is a democracy, and which is fairly free and relatively sort of equal for the people. Of course, nothing's perfect. I mean, no style of government is perfect, and this creates problems. And indeed, this is where the book starts off with conflict between the Empire, which is extremely large and immensely powerful, and the Three Planets Alliance, which is small and quite individual and very much, free thinkers and such. There are several other factions in this universe. One of them is the Pheasant Dominion, which are essentially a sort of trade group. They are very small. They only really have one significant planet with a few other assets that is located pretty much dead centre between the Empire and the Alliance. You also have a group which is heading back to Earth, which have their own agenda, same as the Pheasant group, and these play small roles, but very pivotal roles throughout the series. Obviously, I'm not going to say what roles either of those play because they are very significant to the plot and are quite literally game changers to the overall plot line of the novels. Now, both the Empire and the Alliance have their own one significant sort of heroic figure, their little legendary figure, although this is a series that obviously is called Legend of the Galactic Heroes, heroes being plural. There are multiple people in the series that this definitely refers to. It's not just the two characters I'm going to talk about, but there are multiple characters that obviously this would apply to and make massive contributions overall. Now, the Empire has a character called Reinhard von Lohengrin, I have to read that, and he is nicknamed the Golden Brat or the Golden Lion, depending on where you are in the series. And the major character for the Alliance is called Yang Wen Li, always nicknamed Yang the Magician. He's called Yang the Magician because although he wants a quiet life as a historian, he realises, so does the Alliance, that he has a phenomenal gift, just an innate talent for unconventional battlefield tactics, and he becomes their commander in battle against the Empire, and the Empire becomes very wary of him because he keeps winning battles, and he's just by use of strange and unusual tactics that nobody else can think of, because of course you're talking about the Empire force, which is enormous, versus his force, the Alliance force, which is tiny. He can do things that the Empire can't do because it's just that big and cumbersome. He's small, light, he has to think on his feet. However, Reinhard, the person in the Empire, he is not slow or stupid himself. He is just as skilled as a commander and tactically as Yang, and they are an equal match for one another, and they do respect one another as people because they realise that they kind of have competing and indeed similar characteristics in many ways. They just want the world to be a different way. Yang wants everybody to just live life in a free and open democracy, and Reinhard wants it to be rather more authoritarian, although he is willing to give people a certain amount of freedom himself. He's not actually the horrible dictator that you get the impression that he might be at the start of this first book. He's actually not as dark and not as brutal as he might appear from a sort of a dictator type figure. You'll learn that he evolves, so does Yang, and they evolve, in interesting ways. And indeed that is a significant thing about these books because they are filled with an awful lot of characters. I mean, there are probably 100 plus characters that are talked about in somewhat fairly heavy detail by the end of the last book, and they all play significant roles and they all evolve. And despite the fact that there are 10 books, each book is at maximum 250 pages, some of them are barely only 200, so it's a 10 book series, but it's not even 2,500 pages total, so it's relatively small by comparison to many modern science fiction and indeed especially fantasy series. These are quite short and light, but they are deep and involved and have intricate elements that frankly is remarkable to read and a joy to read, because you realise you're reading something where it's short and fast but deep. That's not something you find that often, and in fact these are one of the best series I've ever seen of an author doing this, with sort of smaller books but getting the sheer depth that other authors can only achieve with very large weighty tomes I've seen for a long time. And I've been very impressed overall by these books. The world building is fantastic. You have the Empire, you have the Alliance, you have several other locations, they even go back to Earth for a while. They're all well realised and well described. The characters are all developed well and evolve in different and unusual ways, some of them predictable, some of them very unpredictable. And this deals with very a large amount of subjects. Of course, it deals with politics and styles of government and styles of ruling, because of course you have the Empire, you have the Three Planets Alliance. Neither of them are perfect, they both have an enormous amount of flaws. You get the impression that frankly if they could essentially combine their two ideas into something else, although nobody's ever sure what, and you'll never suggested what that might be, then that probably would be the best for both parties involved as well as the other groups, because you'd have something that is not authoritarian but not totally open and liberal, where you have a certain amount of government control but a certain amount of freedom for the individual parties, which personally sounds an interesting and very effective method personally to me. Now, I am not a history buff at all. I did not enjoy history in school. These books focus, I think, on a certain amount of real world history, specifically European history, although there is certainly a large amount of sort of Eastern history combined and mixed up in this as well. I do not know enough to realise what sort of groups and what countries that the factions and things in these groups are exactly referring to. I mean, the empire is a Germanic in nature, the German Empire, but I'm not sure what aspects of that and exactly the timeline, or which part of the German Empire they were, and at what angles and such. Same as the three planets Alliance, and indeed the present Dominion, and indeed even Earth. They all have obviously bases on real life civilizations and countries. I'm not an expert on which, but it's still really interesting to see and fantastic to see overall. Oh, and another little point that the book make a big point of talking about is, of course, society and the evolution of society as a overall concept, because you have two different societies, one controlled by a central location, one is more of a democracy. They explore which of them sort of works best. You are never told which, because there is literally no judgment. It is more an exploration of authoritarian versus democracy, explored in an interesting way. The author's opinion, I'm not going to say which I think he prefers, but I think there is a very particular way he does think. Although he doesn't force you to think that way, he likes to give you scope and the space to think for yourself on what think that is the best way of ruling a country, what way you think of living a society, and how societies evolve, because the societies in both for the Empire and the Alliance both do evolve over time in interesting and curious ways, because of course they can't not be affected by what's going on. You've got basically a massive war between the two enormous groups, one a lot bigger than the other, but still, and they do change over time, because of course you can't not. When you're talking about conflict of such a scale, it will change how you work, how you think. And I think it's interesting because even the controlling parties of both groups, even they realise that their societies are changing, and they can't just say, well, everybody must stay the same, nobody's allowed to evolve and change, we must stay the same as what we were, whilst we, for instance in the Empire's point of view, everybody must think the same whilst we take over the Alliance. They are aware that they have to give a certain amount of give and take, frankly, and that's an interesting point of view, especially when you think of they are an authoritarian group, but they are not stupid. They are aware of the size and the people, and how it works is really interesting and fascinating overall. And indeed, in summary, I would highly recommend this series, because they are well written, with a fantastic world, a fantastic large amount of characters. It does not feel overwhelming because the books are short and fast. They all feel very episodic in nature, like different episodes of a TV show, of which there is a anime show that exists, which I will be watching very, very shortly. I may have watched them by the time this video goes live, in fact. And overall, a fantastic series. It's well written, and I would recommend this no end, because it's just enjoyable, because you get to really be invested in the characters and their way through this conflict and what's going on, and you want them to do well, both the Empire and the Alliance side. It's not just, you're not only rooting for the Alliance the whole time. There are many people on the Empire side, they're actually decent people. They may not be doing it always for the right reasons as such, but they are still decent individuals, and it's an interesting view, an interesting mix. So overall, highly recommended. And with that said, that is actually it for this review. If you've read this series or you would like to, then please leave a comment and we can have a talk about it. If you have any suggestions based on books you think I might like based on these, then again leave a comment. All my social media links can be found in the description box below, as well as links to the first book in this series on the Goodreads website. That said, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.